MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, always talking the game we love, college football. Usually talking the game we love, college football. 99% of the time talking college football. If you've watched me for a long time, if you've listened to specifically when I am addressed with comments and questions on the chat, it's come out a number of times. I love the NFL as well. There was a situation in the NFL yesterday as I was checking out the red zone, as I typically do on a Sunday afternoon with my son. Colts and Texans, one of three NFL games that went into overtime yesterday that I would like to address the situation by head coach Frank Reich of Indianapolis. Okay, the score was tied 34-all in overtime. And of course, you probably have come to find out that Frank Reich went for it in his own territory on 4th and 4. They didn't make it. Houston was in prime position to gain a few yards, kick the field goal, win the game 37-34. So on the surface, bad decision by Frank Reich because, of course, if you punt it away, then that's the fundamental logical play to make. I'm all about logic. I'm all about making the right call, the percentage choice, the percentage decision. There are a few other things to take into consideration here because my initial reaction was, he's not going for that. And then even before they ran the play, I thought, you know what? I like this decision. I like this call. Let me line it up for you one more time. Colts Texans 34-all in overtime. Obviously, in the NFL, if a game ends after one quarter of overtime, it ends in a tie. And we've already seen this twice in the NFL this year, now 3 times. Or it could have been 3 times. We've seen it twice in the NFL already. 3 overtime games on Sunday. Normally, I would hate this decision, but there's one huge difference in the decision that Reich made. And maybe it goes back to his days of being the comeback kid at Maryland when they came back from 5 touchdowns down to beat Miami 42-40. If you remember that game from the 1984 season. Then while spending most of his NFL career on the field as a backup quarterback, he, of course, came into the game as the backup quarterback for an injured Jim Kelly in the 1993 NFL playoffs against Houston, 92 NFL playoffs against Houston. And, of course, down 35-3 in the third quarter, Frank Reich, captain comeback, has led the most prolific comeback in the history of the NFL at quarterback in a playoff game and in college football history. Remarkable. All right, so maybe he just thinks we go for it, we make it every time. This is just the mentality. I can't lose here. Okay, so the situation again. Tie game, Colts have the ball, 4th and 4 at their own 43 with 27 seconds left. If the clock hits double zeros, then the game is going to be a tie and both teams walk off the field. Okay, so if Indianapolis punts, as you would expect them to do, Houston is most likely, after a 45-yard punt with about a 10-yard return, most likely going to have the ball at its own 25-yard line with about 20 seconds left to play. So the chances of this game ending in a tie are huge. They're about 85%. Houston at its own 20 or 25-yard line with 20 seconds left. Chances of the tie are about 85%, something in that range. Okay. If the Colts go for it and they make it, they'll have the ball at the 50, roughly, at the 50, about 22, 23 seconds left. They will probably have to take a timeout. They have one of the most clutch, if not the most clutch, field goal kickers in history, although not the huge leg at age 45 and Adam Vinatieri. But in terms of clutch, they would probably have to give him another 15 yards down to the 35 to give him a legitimate shot at a 52-yard field goal at that point that he's going to make, 60 to 70% of the time. He's an 85% kicker, something in that range. He'd probably make it from 50 to 52 yards most of the time, but it's not a lock by any stretch. So if the Colts make it, they're not guaranteed of making another yard, of course, or making anything close to the sufficient number of yards. And even if they do, Vinatieri may not make the kick. So he's got about a 60-70% chance of making the kick. They probably have about a 35 to 40% chance of winning the game if they make the first down. If they don't make it, and this is what happened, of course, they didn't make the first down, Houston isn't automatically going to win. Of course, they've got to make a kick. They also have to pick up yardage. They had the ball at the Colts 43. That's a 60-yard field goal. Unfortunately for the Colts, Deshaun Watson did what he does typically. He found his fellow Clemson alum, DeAndre Hopkins, for a big gainer, and they picked up the necessary yardage for a makeable field goal. And so I would consider that, based on having to make the kick and having to pick up sufficient yardage in only 20 seconds prior to the kick, about a 70% shot that if you don't make it, if you're the Colts on 4th and 4 at your own 43 with 27 seconds left to play, there's going to be about a 70% chance that you lose the game, that you have lost the game by not converting. Okay. This is what we have yet to take into consideration, is that in this situation, this is unlike any other situation we've seen like this that I can recall. And if anybody has a situation like this that matches the score and time situation, let me know, because I don't recall it. Most of the time we're talking about you make it and your odds are amped up that you would win the game. If you don't make it, then they decline precipitously that you're going to lose the game. So it's either a win or loss situation. It's the end of regulation. You go to overtime possibly, or it's a situation in which you're up or you're down. Therefore, it's a win-loss circumstance. This is not a win-loss circumstance. There is a high probability that this game is going to end in a tie. And if the Colts punt the ball, they're not protecting a lead. They are not protecting overtime to go to overtime in a tie game in regulation. They are protecting a tie. They are basically saying you're going to possibly win the game. It's not likely, but most likely we're punting the ball to you, so we tie. So the Colts went for the win. They didn't play against the tie, because if they punt, again, they're not protecting a lead or protecting a tie game for overtime. They are ensuring a tie. So that's what makes it a good gamble, is because they couldn't have won the game if they punted. The players supported the decision. Frank Reich is building a program in Indianapolis. He's building a mindset. The face of the franchise, the best player on the field for the Colts, is Andrew Luck. He has pulled out more fourth-quarter comebacks early in a career than any quarterback in history. So he's made the clutch throws. He's made the big plays. He made a poor pass, just a flat-out bad pass, a low pass that could not be caught in this particular situation. But the Colts and Frank Reich, I believe, made the right decision to not play for the tie, but to play for the win and put the ball in the hands of their best player, unlike what Penn State did on 4th and 5 just a day earlier. So for me, Indianapolis going to 1-3 versus 1-2-1 is not going to make a difference, most likely, in its playoff fate, whereas moving to 2-2 with a victory would have been significant in a division where they are trying to challenge the Jacksonville Jaguars and now the Houston Texans, who are now 1-3. So again, tying the game and going 1-2-1 isn't the end of the world versus losing and going to 1-3 when you had the chance to win and go to 2-2. My thoughts on the Frank Reich decision for the Indianapolis Colts that backfires on him in terms of execution on the field, and they lose to the Houston Texans 37-34 in overtime. My splash into the NFL. Would love to talk more NFL, but we just don't have enough time. And of course, this is the place for college football discussion, debate, and analysis right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We'll see you next time.